sorry.
Check the speaker. Gotta turn it on.
As you know, the song you just heard, Wonderful Tonight, was George and Maureen's wedding song. It is a beautiful tribute to loving someone always for just who they are. One night, a few weeks after they started dating, George and Maureen were dancing to this song, and George, yes George, sang it to Maureen and looked right at her during the words, "How much I love you," thus professing his profound love for his future wife. Over the years, every time that song came on the radio, no matter where they were, he grabbed her hand or danced with her, and he'd sing it to her again. Maureen asked this song to be played this last time that they are together. We gather today because that is what we do. It is human nature when someone we love has died, to stop, to carve out a sacred space, to remember, to reflect, and to gather up the memories in a safe place, so the person we lost will always be with us. This is the most important first step on the long and winding path of the grief journey. Welcome, my name is Kathy Fluehr, and I am honored to be the celebrant of our time together today as we celebrate the life and mourn the death of George Kelly Jr. We are here to stand in silent vigil and support for his family, his extended family, and his friends that he made family. Today is your day, a time to know that hearts and souls are with you as you begin to make sense of your loss and create a place in your lives for the memories of George. Let us begin our time together with a moment of silence to clear away the concerns of the day and to be very present here in this sacred space to focus on the stories of George Kelly. The Guardian. Trust in me, for I am here to keep you safe, safe from fear. I will protect you and stand watch at the wall. I will put myself in harm's way or catch you when you fall. I will remain ever faithful, always vigilant, loyal and true. I do this for my country, and I do it for you. I am your guardian. On me you can depend. You'll never have to worry. I am with you till the end. And that is what George Kelly Jr. was, a guardian. He was a strong guardian of his country, of which he was a proud, proud patriot. He was a dependable defender of the communities where he lived and served. And most especially, he was a staunch protector of the family that he loved. But let's go back to the beginning of George's life. As many of you know, George grew up in Philadelphia, and his love of country was almost guaranteed since he was born on the 4th of July. He was the second oldest of 4 children of George and Alberta. Of course, he wasn't just the second born, he was the only boy, and thus he was spoiled by his sisters. Even though he picked on them and was a notorious prankster, George's mother called him a torturing son of a gun when he teased his sisters. And even with all this abuse, they still adored him and they all stayed close. The best kind of existence is to exist for others. And no truer words could be said of George. This lifelong guardian and protector joined the Marines at 17 and served his country for 4 years and was discharged honorably, as though there was any other way for George, as a staff sergeant. It was a natural procession from the Marine Corps to the police academy. He faithfully served in the force for 43 years, first in Philadelphia and then on to Northampton Township. He took great pride in serving as a police officer, but he also had some fun while doing it. One Christmas Eve, he was working at the Roundhouse in Philadelphia, and he was charged with releasing the pre-approved prisoners for one night. He gathered everybody up and told them, if you sing a Christmas carol, you'll be released for the evening. Well, only one guy started singing, And George said, all right, you can go. Well, lo and behold, everybody started singing. Of course, they were pre-approved, so it was good, right? And when he moved out of the city, George took the same approach to policing in Northampton as he did in Philadelphia. When he first arrived on the new force, his fellow cops wondered, who is this guy? After all, the crime in Northampton was nothing like it was in the city, right? But soon enough, they utilized his knowledge, and he mentored many young officers throughout the years. Of course, he also enjoyed many softball and hockey games, along with that cooler of beer afterwards. And he made lifelong friends on the force. And even though he's been retired for 10 years, these men and their families never lost touch. As a father of 4, George was a tall, imposing figure who never yelled, but commanded respect. He wasn't necessarily strict, but there was an understanding that if you stepped out, which apparently David often did, there would be consequences. Like rebuilding a deck in the rain when the boys set it on fire. George was also an approachable and loving father too. He took Alexa to all the father-daughter dances and posed for pictures. He drove Jeanette and her friends to music concerts, even all the way into the city to the Tower Theater. Of course, it wasn't easy being the daughter of George Kelly, as he always made sure to run a background check on anybody the girls were dating. Did he do that for the girls too? The family had a pool in their backyard and had many fun pool parties that included barbecues, karaoke, and volleyball tournaments over the years, which included a few visits from the Northampton Police Department when the noise levels got too loud or the smoke grenades were set off. Rest assured, the Kellys had the safest pool in the neighborhood since George was constantly testing the pH levels and playing with the chemicals. Certainly the volleyball court was up to USA volleyball standards, as George made sure to measure and spray paint the lines before every game. George taught the boys how to swim in the pool, and he and David would often race. But George would never let him win. He'd say, he needs to earn the win. And when David eventually did win, George was so proud. At this time, I'd like to invite David to come up and share some thoughts with you.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's good to see you all. So yeah, I just kind of wrote these words. It's really just like my kind of perspective on my dad. So I left most of you guys out for a little bit, but I'm one up here, right? But I wanted to start by thanking you guys all for being here. And with the police force, what you guys did, that was honestly amazing. That's what my dad wanted. And it means a lot to know that, you know, he impacted so many lives, and he's got so many people here and family here to support him and his family through this, this tough time. But yeah, it's been a really long time since I've seen like most of you. Like some close to 20 years, honestly. So yeah, if I look a little differently than I did the last time you saw me, let it be noted that the lighting here is really just doing that. It's not what it looks like. But seriously, I appreciate you guys coming. So and thank you, Kathy. When we were prepping for this today, Kathy was asking us to think of words that best describe your dad. And for some reason, I was kind of drawing a blank. I don't know why. Because I've used so many words to describe my dad over the years, many of which I probably shouldn't say here today, just in my years. And then there was other words that just took me a bit longer to understand, words that I grew to see and learn as I've kind of gotten older and become a man. So my head was kind of all over the place when I was asked such a simple question, but there was a few words that my sister Alexa and then my mom said that kind of stuck with me after the meeting. Actually, Alexa, I forget the word you used, but the word what she was basically saying, her point was that, the point Alexa was making with the word she used was that my dad loved to teach people, and he loved to lead people, and he wanted to bring the best out of people. And this was true in his professional life, as many people here can attest to, but even more so with his family, and specifically for me. it's these things, these skills, these lessons that he taught me throughout my life that really shaped who I am today, and I truly believe that. And what's funny is that I never even realized that he was teaching me things that I would carry with me forever. And not all the lessons or things were these deep, thought-provoking lessons. Some were. But as I was writing this, I realized like how many things I actually did learn from my dad. I won't name them all, otherwise I'd be here all day, but he taught me things like camping. My dad's been taking me camping since I was a boy. We've been all over. He taught me how to set up a tent, how to build a fire, how to scare the hell out of your children by telling them stories about the Jersey Devil while you're all alone. My dad taught me how to play hockey. My dad loved playing hockey. He played hockey forever. He taught me and Tommy how to play. I wound up getting really good at hockey, and I continued to play until I was an adult. He taught me how to play as a team, be disciplined in the practice, and really work at something if you wanted to be great at it. Tommy didn't really follow the hockey path, but he went the music path, and you learned similar lessons by Dad when he taught you how to play the guitar. My dad loved music. He taught me how to swim, ride a bike, play chess, catch fish. We loved fishing. Catch, cook, and clean crab. Rake and bag endless amounts of leaves, which was my least favorite thing that he ever taught me. And he repeatedly taught me year after year, despite my efforts to avoid him during those times. The list goes on. So, I've always looked up to my dad. I wanted to be my dad, honestly, until I hit my teenage years, as Kathy alluded to. That's a story for another time. But my dad, when I was younger, my dad was a decorated police officer. So I went to Camp Cadet when I was 12 years old, which was a Pennsylvania State Police program for youth that wanted a future in law enforcement. Believe it or not, I did go. And I went because I knew he'd be proud of me for going. So I did go, and I kicked ass. I even won a marksmanship award thanks to him. Because prior to me going to the camp, my dad had been taking me shooting since I was a boy. So when I got to the camp, I was already a leg up on a lot of those kids that were there. So that was something my dad kind of set me up for, which was great. My dad was a proud Marine, so I wanted to be in the military. I remember one morning telling my dad that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and he nearly choked on his coffee. And he said, "Let me tell you something, Dave. If you don't make it through SEAL team training, then you're just another squid. Every Marine is as tough as a Navy SEAL." So from that day on, I then wanted to become a Marine. My mom described my dad as brave and strong, and what a fitting description. He married a beautiful woman with 3 children. My brother and I were his boys. His sister Jeanette was a teenager, and he raised us as his own. I was real young. Jeanette, you were older, so your relationship was a little different with my dad, or with Daddy, but at least you were fortunate enough to be able to see what it was like to be a good mother. And that's bravery. I mean, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I would do that. No offense to people who've done that. I shall be commended for that. I'm just saying. Another time my dad was really brave was when it was at my wedding, the day I got married. My brother was my best man, naturally. But he was too terrified to do the best man speech. Understandably, I couldn't do the same speech at his wedding for the same reason. Honestly, it's just a miracle I'm up here today. But so what did my dad do? My dad steps up, he writes his own speech for me, and prior to the wedding, I had no idea that my dad could speak in front of people. I didn't know he had the nerves of steel to stand up in front of 130 people and just give a speech. But he did. And the speech was amazing and thoughtful, but it went on and on and on. For those of you who were there, it was a very uncomfortable amount of time. It was beautiful. But yeah, he was up there just telling speeches that paint this incredible portrait of me, and he was mentioning the story about burning my house down with my sister in it, or nearly burning my house down with my sister in it. And we're up there in front of my boss, my CEO, and I'm like, these guys are probably thinking, man, David lived the life. But yeah, so I don't know, my dad did a lot for me. That was something that I needed, and he was there to stand up for me. He had the courage to stand up for me when I needed him. My dad was a great father to me. While I was growing up, I just started to see that more clearly. But it took me getting married and having a son of my own to truly understand that.
Smart. There was little he didn't know, and he loved to share his knowledge. George loved to read, and he especially loved learning about war history, American history, and Marine Corps history. He loved hockey, camping, fishing, and skating. He knew how to fix and build pretty much anything. In fact, George built the deck and put on the addition to the family house, which probably opened the door for a potential future for Tommy, who is now a contractor. And as a grandpa, George loved to share his knowledge with his grandkids. When he was a Marine, George was an aviation mechanic. Often he would show his grandkids the planes he worked on at the Aviation Museum at the shore or at the Willow Grove air shows. A trip to the beach was an opportunity to learn. He taught them about horseshoe crabs, sunsets, the stars, the cycle of life. And he spoke to the kids like they were 45, not just kids. A few unknown or off-brand things about George. You already know he was a romantic when it came to Maureen. But did you also know he played guitar and loved impersonating Kurt Cobain while singing Nirvana's Lithium during a wild karaoke session, which he never gave up the microphone for, apparently. He met many rock bands like Aerosmith when he was a Philadelphia cop, collecting illegal t-shirts at music concerts. Also, George never could sit still. He never watched TV, unless, of course, it was the History Channel or National Geographic. But if Jeopardy was on TV, he seemed to know every answer from his vast array of, to quote him, useless knowledge. But what George most wanted us to remember him for was his patriotism, his intense love of country. He showed it in his daily flag raising, his service to country and community, and how he lived his life, with passion and appreciation for all he had been given and earned. George touched so many lives and inspired so many people. At this time, I'd like to invite George's longtime friend, Mike Clark, to share some memories with us.
Kathy really tried to help me and blow up the print even bigger, but I still need my glasses to read. So you have to bear with me on that. Maureen, Tom, Dave, Jeanette, Alexa, it's an honor to be here and to talk about your father. And on behalf of Kathy, my wife Kathy, and I, and the members of the Marine Corps League, please accept our condolences for the loss of a great man. I first met George Kelly in 1995 when he was hired as a rookie police officer in the Northampton Township Police Department. I was assigned to my platoon. As anyone in law enforcement knows, or if you watch TV lately, you know the rookie officer must spend a large amount of time in training and being instructed on the policies and the procedures of the department, just so they can know what it's really like to be an officer. But this rookie was a little bit different. When he came with 20 years of experience, an enormous wealth of knowledge, and in all aspects of law enforcement from his prior experience in the city of Philadelphia. And it was because of these qualities that George possessed. And being George's sergeant, I felt that I could learn as much from George as he could from me. George was one of those officers that everyone seemed to gravitate to. He always had a smile and was always willing to work. He was always the first to help out in any situation that a fellow officer may encounter, and provide encouragement when needed. George was one of those guys that always led by example. It was because of George's work ethic and his knowledge that he was promoted to the rank of detective in 1999, leading the patrol division. In just 4 years of being hired, George was promoted, which is an unbelievable accomplishment and a well-deserved promotion for anybody who's worked in law enforcement field knows. In 2000, I had the opportunity to work more closely with George once again, this time in the detective division. All I can say is that George's work ethic had not changed in this time period when he was in patrol. He always worked hard on his cases assigned him and took every one as a challenge. There were a few phrase words or comments that we always had about George while we worked as detectives. One was when George was assigned the case, George would emphatically say, someone's going to get locked up on this one. Without a doubt, it happened. You know? There was another term that the detectives and I had for George, and we would sometimes refer to him as Invisible George. Now, he got this nickname because every time George was assigned to follow someone, he would be so close behind the people, we would say, how can nobody see him? He must be invisible. Hence the nickname Invisible George. But during my time working with George, it was a great pleasure to the detectives, and he was outstanding in his job. He was definitely an A-class detective. My relationship with George, Joseph wasn't with the police department. As you can see, we shared another common bond. We were both United States Marines. George and I were instructed in boot camp, as only the Marine Corps can do, in the kindest and compassionate way, the true values of the Marine Corps. Those values were honor, courage, and commitment. Values that George displayed every day in everything that he did, and truly believed in. George was always the spit and polish guy, as they say in the military. Whether he was in his police uniform or his Marine Corps League uniform, he always looked perfect. I commented one time to George about that, and George said it was the best way to show pride in your organization, and George always represented his organizations quite well. George was a true leader in the Marine Corps League. He became the commandant of the Patriot Detachment in Richboro, and that's part of the gentlemen you see standing around here today in the red jackets and the white shirts. As commandant, George is always at the forefront during any military type event in the township or any surrounding communities, whether a parade, a funeral, a Veterans Day program, or Memorial Day service. George always kept the detachment looking sharp and following all the military protocols. One event that really sticks with me in my mind is our detachment was asked to be the first honor guard or color guard for the opening of the new Washington Crossing National Cemetery here in Bucks County. During that ceremony, George carried the Marine Corps flag and led the detachment. How fitting is it today that of all days is the day we take George back to that final resting place among so many other veterans like George. I can say that I, as well as a number of people in the back and in the room here, had the privilege and the honor to work with a great cop, great man, and a hell of a Marine. So as the Marine Corps saying goes, Semper Fi, George, carry on. Hoorah! Thank you, Gus. We're going to sit down
George's friend, John Sentell, would like to share some stories with you as well. John?
Thank you, everyone. As you know, my name is John Sentell. I had the privilege of working with George and working with the Township Police Department. It was quite a privilege. At times in our life, there are rare occasions when we were fortunate enough to work with someone who we recognized as a true, valued friend and colleague. Someone you could count on no matter what. That was George. George was one of those rare people. It's a sincere honor and privilege to know George and count him as an exceptional friend and colleague. I'd like to share with you some things that came from the heart as I thought about George, the great person he was. I'll keep them brief. I think George would appreciate that. First, George had an enduring love of family. He had an unconditional love for his family. He strived to keep his family first in all he did. I'm sure he will be missed but never forgotten by his loved ones. Please keep them all in your thoughts and prayers at this trying time. George was a true patriot. He didn't just have the mere trimmings of patriotism. He lived it. I don't know if his being born on the 4th of July had anything to do with it, but you certainly can't argue with the results. George had a genuine love of country, which he demonstrates through his service. He served with honor and valor, first in the United States Marine Corps, followed by an exemplary combined 40-plus year career in law enforcement. George served with distinction first in the Philadelphia Police Department, and then with the Northampton Township Police Department. Even in his retirement, George continued giving of himself to his service in the Marine Corps League. When George took an oath of service, it was not just words. Rather, it was a creed that was the compass by which he lived his life. Thank you, George, for your incredible service.
To share his thoughts with you as well.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Charles Pinkerton. Everyone knows me as Pinky. Now, we'll take a minute to Maureen Jeanette and Matt, Tommy and Mary Kate, David and Megan, and Alexa and Andre, please accept the police department's deepest sympathies. I also want to extend them to George's sister, Catherine, Karen, and Kim. When you spoke about George, you know, talking, the Irish call that a gift to gab. I'm going to ask for a little bit of George's strength so I can talk about him and how much he meant to the police department. Retired Chief Clark said when George arrived at Northampton Police Department on May the 8th, 1995, he was already a seasoned veteran police officer. His job at Northampton was not a retirement job. He quickly took on responsibilities to make our agency great. Some of the people here today spoke about George, his time as a SWAT team officer, participation in the Marine Corps League. I briefly want to talk to you about his time as a detective. George was the same age as my older brother, and as many of you can imagine, older brothers influence and serve as a mentor. My older brothers took me to music shows, hunting adventures, and talked about their time in the military. George had many of these same stories, except his mentoring included the trips to Philadelphia in pursuit of criminals. All of us who served as detectives with George remember those trips to Philadelphia. Many of the times it was to Kensington, chasing burglars or thieves. Maybe West Philadelphia, where George worked as a police officer, and George would always talk about what would happen on a certain street corner. Usually with his partner Gary, you know, and a story would always come up and George would say, hey, you know, Gary and I were over here and we chased somebody, you know, or, you know, we were over here when such and such an officer had a shootout and Gary and I chased the guy down the street. And George was a tenacious investigator, and retired Chief Clark spoke about that, you know, George's famous words, somebody's going to get locked up. And to George, that usually meant that the victim was somebody that we looked out for. And George was not a cyber detective. He was an old school detective that relied on fingerprints and something called a flow chart. So as a detective, you would look at serial crimes, burglaries, thefts, vandalism, and you develop a flow chart and you would say, you know, on this date, that crime's going to happen. So George would have us out on these stakeouts, and the crime would happen. George wouldn't know whether or not it was the deli, the gas station, or the beer distributor that got hit, but George knew that on this night, a crime was going to occur. And he would have us out there, and sure enough, it paid off. We made an arrest, we locked somebody up, and that was, George just found this old school of a flow chart. He had things written out, okay, on a Thursday night, this is going to happen. One of those things was the gentleman that was, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, but he went around with a BB gun and was shooting out windows. He shot out house windows, car windows, store windows. He just went all over down Holland and everywhere else. And George said, I tracked all these criminal mischief and these broken windows, and we set up a surveillance all over the place. And the guy came down the street, and George had us in parking lots, he had us in highways, he had us all over the place, and he knew the route this guy was going to go. And sure enough, on the stakeout, the guy comes, rolls down his window with a BB gun to shoot out a car window, and that was George in the driveway. George, I got him. We chased him. We got him at his house. And George probably cleared 100 criminal mischief from broken windows just by following a flow chart. And he knew when the crimes were going to occur.
It was never my intention to speak today. However, something happened that was too special not to share with you. This morning, we've all heard about the many attributes and facets of George's life. Now, I will speak of him as my love and my husband. In preparing for today, it was necessary for me to go through George's final papers, which he, of course, had neatly placed in a mark folder. Over the years, he often reminded me, when the time comes, you're going to need this more. So yes, I found those papers I needed, but I also found something else, something very special. You see, George had securely placed a card inside this folder. It was an anniversary card that he had previously given to me. And it was perfect. Here I was, once again, reading George's words to me at a time when I desperately needed his comfort. This is showing a part of George saved only for me and was mine alone. But in saying my final goodbye to him, I will share a glimpse of our love with all of you. Maureen, I couldn't have known when we met that everything in my life before then had been leading me to you. But looking back, I realized that every decision led me to just the right turn, and that every road, taken or not, brought me one step closer to you and the love we share. Today, I know for sure that when our paths came together and we found one another, it was really only the beginning of the most beautiful journey of all, the journey of two hearts that beat as one. With all my love, George.
Gentlemen, just raise the casket, please. We'll step forward. Turn to our right.
Order! Arms! Detail! Dismiss!